there's a freedom on it that you don't, usually you're like setting something loose, and you don't know how big of an impact it can possibly make.
Yeah.
I mean, it could make a bigger impact than you have any idea. I mean, it could be like striking gold.
Yeah.
And it's what it is, it's the gold inside of you, and you don't know it,
Right.
that it exists there, and then someone else will watch your video and find out there's gold there.
Yeah.
She just said something that I could spend my whole life looking for and miss it, but she just said it.
Right.
And she's giving me permission to take this path to know who I am and
Yeah.
know what I'm good at and be okay with what I'm good at and what is my contribution.
How do you feel now, knowing that no matter what happens tomorrow, your grandkids and your great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids will get to know you as a real person? How do you feel about that?
That has big returns on it. Really, really big. I mean, big returns, like a big ripple effect that is pretty impossible to calculate how
Yeah.
the spectrum of how much that's going to impact the generations after me. Because I mean, there's all kinds of stories. People have all kinds of stories. We all get here to the planet
Mm-hmm.
through being born,
Yeah.
and then we all have different paths. But it is way different watching it as far as like in video format than reading it in a book,
Yeah.
or reading somebody's memoirs, or reading something that somebody else wrote. Like somebody wrote about someone else's life
Yeah.
from their memoirs. I mean, you get to hear it from the person themselves in the best way that they could describe how they feel, what they think, when they were making their very best choices.
Right.
Because it's really impossible to know how you would react until you're straight away in the situation. You have to make a choice.
Yeah.
I mean, we all can say, well, I would have done this and I would have done that. And I was like, you know what? Would you have? It's not fair. It's not right. It's very uncool.
Yeah.
Because you don't know. If you were, pushed into a situation that was like, you really have, and you have to dig deep. And, so it's like getting to hear somebody's story from them, the value, and watching them tell it. The value on that is just high value.
Yeah.
It just, because there's a chance I would not ever have the conversations I had on camera with each one of my grandkids. There's just no way. It's impossible. And then when the impossibility happens that, there's two generations, I'm a great grandmother, and then I'm a great grandmother, I'm like, come on. It's going to be different than back when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You would have got to hear it from me directly. You would have got to watch my demeanor as I delivered it, or it's more than a 100% return. It's like a 200 and 300% return.
Yeah.
That's measurable beyond the scale of measuring.
Yeah.
It's beyond the scale of measuring because it's more tactile. From the only thing you're not getting is smell-o-vision. Well, because you're getting the voice tone and the intonations and how they speak and how they, handle themselves in situations or sticky questions or, you're hearing, you're seeing,
Yeah, and your expressions tell what you're saying means.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's not a robot telling about a story. It's your face, your expressions, your micro expressions, everything about the way that you move when you're telling your story and the way that you talk with your hands during certain parts of your stories and just all the things that that little slight smile at certain parts where
Sure.
just all the little things that can't be quantified,
No.
but add up to a person, add up, to who you are and what
Yeah.
makes you you and what makes your stories important. And I think you're right. The value is immeasurable, realistically.
Yeah.
you know, and I think if you're trying to quantify what a legacy video is worth, especially the legacy conversations that we do at 3C, it is priceless. But if you wanted some hard numbers on what it's actually worth to your family, if something you said, either some sort of, something that encourages, or something that instructs, or something that passes on some sort of, values about the way, the right way to live life, to be successful. If even one of those things makes a difference in anybody's life downstream, the generations to come, your great-great-grandchild, is inspired and asks for a $1 an hour raise because, his great-great-grandma believed in him. $1 an hour over 40 years is $80,000. Probably even a 10x over that. I mean, it's immeasurable how much your legacy is worth.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, I think, that a lot of people don't think that way. They think my life has no value. But I think that your failures instruct just as much as the times that you win, the times that you succeed. Because if something, if telling your great-grandkids or great-great-great-grandkids or even your own children about a time that things didn't work out the way you wanted, or the way you hoped, or maybe even a very big failure, and that keeps them from having the same failure, that's also immeasurable. Because sometimes those failures, sometimes it's not just a monetary failure. Sometimes it ends up being, sometimes people lose all hope. Sometimes it affects their families in irreparable ways, because they don't have the tools to know that tomorrow can be better. And so I think if you, as you're here today, so you are the matriarch of your family. At some point, you're going to be the oldest living member of your family, and it's your job to pass on the tools that your family is going to need to survive and thrive, as well as you can pass it on.
Right, exactly.
However, and for some people that's a cell phone video of them just talking about their life or talking about the things that they think matter. But the great thing about what we're doing at 3C is that I want it to be something that your great-grandkids want to watch, that it's a real connection. They see that it's real and it's authentic, and it's high quality, so that it's something beautiful to watch.
It's
and
pleasurable to watch.
Right.
It is pleasurable to watch.
Yeah, and like the same way that you take flowers to your mom and dad's gravesite every year, I would love it if families were to watch, my own kids were to watch your video, and other families were to watch their parents' legacy videos every year as a remembrance, as okay, what did we get out of this video of them talking about their lives? Because the interesting thing is that every time you watch it, depending on where you're at in your own life,
different stuff will pop out.
yeah, you'll end up taking something different.
A different
from
takeaway.
it.
A different
Yeah.
takeaway.
And if it was a book, I mean, no one's going to read a book about your life every single year. It's literally
Very few people will read a book again and again. Very few.
a lot of people won't read it once.
Sure.
And I mean, I'm sure maybe 80% of your immediate descendants would read a book about you. Maybe that might be generous if you were to actually finish one. But it's just one of those situations where the odds that someone would read it multiple times are very, very low. But the odds that they would watch a beautiful video of you and their mom talking about legacy and values and things like that is, I think, very high.
Mm-hmm. Because even if when I did mine, it was like my advice to the grandkids is go to college first.
Yeah.
Everything else can wait. And what could that provide?
Yeah, even if just one great grandkid took that advice.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Or if
You're not gonna,
multiple of them took that advice to don't let love get in the way. Not that love's not important, but it's like those paths take you down another avenue that you don't ever get back to go to,
right.
Because you're losing
Right.
potential. You're losing income potential,
Yeah.
and you don't know enough about you to make those decisions. You're not settled enough in who you are, even as a 20-year-old, even as a 25-year-old, to be hooked up with somebody who could take you down because they don't have the skill set.
Yeah. They haven't worked.
No.
They haven't found themselves,
Yeah.
and a lot of times you haven't found yourself.
Exactly. So, even if half of my grandkids take the, go to college, and that can be a huge turning point for like generations to come. That, where maybe only one person was a college graduate, now maybe, 6 of the grandkids are college graduates compared to, and then maybe the generation after that, there is, 18 grandkids.
Yeah.
That, so it's like it just
Or more.
it just multiplies in a way that you can't. There's a freedom on it that you don't, you're like setting something loose, and you don't know how big of an impact it can possibly make.
Yeah.
It could make a bigger impact than you have any idea. It could be like striking gold.
Yeah.
And it's what it is, it's the gold inside of you, and you don't know it,
Right.
that it exists there, and then someone else will watch your video and find out there's gold there.
Yeah.
She just said something that I could spend my whole life looking for and miss it, but she just said it.
Right.
And she's giving me permission to take this path to know who I am and know what I'm good at and be okay with what I'm good at and what is my contribution to
Right.
my immediate family, my family line. Where do I play into the contribution of my family line?
Yeah.
Or were we builders? Were we educators? Were we,
Yeah. And I think it also starts a tradition of thinking about what your legacy is. That's not most families don't think that way. But you know what? If your kids watch your legacy conversation video a handful of times or a dozen times, I'll tell you what, they're going to be thinking, this is the way that my great grandma talked about her life. How do I want to talk about my life when I'm 65, 75, 85 years old? What do I want the next generations to know about me? What do I want to be able to say? And I think when you're thinking long term like that, that makes an enormous difference. Even just that long term perspective of, what, there's more than today, there's more than tomorrow. There's my kids, there's my grandkids, there's my great grandkids.
and the world's going to look different when we get 40 years down the road.
Yeah.
When I'm 40 years older, and your little Sam is 43, it's like,
Yeah.
it's going to be a different world. There'll be different challenges, different things that are, important, but then some of the things are going to remain still important.
Yeah,
The
some
thing,
things always remain.
Yeah, there are things that continue to remain important, but the way we play them out could be very different.
Yeah. And I think too, I think a lot of times the way that the older generation, the elder generation in a family passes on the things that are really important. Like in your situation, they would just say, they would just tell their grandkids, go to college, don't get married. They wouldn't explain it. There wouldn't be, 10, 15, 20 minutes about how that, those decisions create a situation where you can't, or it's very hard to turn around
Yes.
or change course.
Yep,
or,
yep.
But
Completely
they
true.
can watch that legacy conversation video and they have all the context for why you said that, and they can see what it means to you. Because I think too, sometimes it's important, so you say it, but you've said it so many times that it becomes just compulsory. You say it because you want to make sure they don't make the same mistakes that you made. But it doesn't have that, when you're 85 years old and you're still, you're telling Samuel, or, one of your great grandkids, make sure that you go to college before you, settle down with somebody, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to have the same gravity behind it to them. To you it does, but it's one of those things where when you've said it so many times, you're saying it at that point. You're not giving the full story, because nobody gives the full story 50 times.
Right.
That's not how we work. We just assume that we've gotten the message out there.
We assume
and
that
that's
we've
not
conveyed.
how messages work.
Yeah, we assume that what we've conveyed, that it's like a no-brainer that they're going to understand,
Right.
and it's like that's a really not a great assumption.
No, because they may not be at a place where they can accept it and receive it
Hear it, yeah.
and make it a part of the way that they look at life. Whereas, if they can watch you talk about it multiple times until, oh, I'm finally at that stage in my life, and I remember Grandma telling this story, and I need to be careful what I do here, because this is a bigger decision that I think it is right now. Because I think that's the other thing, when you're talking about relationships and adults, children, in high school or even college, they don't see those relationships as serious as they might eventually become. Because a relationship can go from not serious to being what defines your life in an instant.
Yeah.
And
6 months or less, yeah. And,
or a marriage proposal,
Yeah.
or any sort of thing, or you move because of them, and that puts your life on a different trajectory entirely. And it may not be a bad thing, but I think they don't. Young adults don't see the doors closing. They only see doors opening. They only see possibilities. They think they can turn around at any time and go back to where they are, but that's not always the case.
No.
A lot of times doors really do close, for a lot of reasons.
And sometimes it's a good thing the door closed.
Yeah.
You'd be thankful for some of those closed doors.
Right.